I got to play this for you. Canada's official Indigenous health expert, and that's a position that exists in Canada apparently. Her name is Carrie Barossa, and she has always been very open about her Native American ancestry. She wears, Native American garb, and when she goes out and she gives talks, she identifies by the name Chief Running Bear or something like that. And she talks a lot about the racism that she's experienced, so she's very open about it. In fact, here are some clips of her on, this is a couple clips. She's on some news programs, and then she also did a TED Talk where she's talking about Indigenous issues. Let's watch that.
Unfortunately, many people that access healthcare feel stigmatized. They might experience racism or prejudice, and whether it's perceived or it's real, when you're experiencing it, it's very real.
Have you experienced it?
I have experienced it.
My great-grandmother was Tlingit. She married an immigrant. They moved from the far northern BC into Saskatchewan, and they had a family.
Greetings. My name's Morningstar Bear. Whew. I'm just going to say it. I'm emotional, so. I'm Bear Clan. I'm an Anishinaabe Métis from Treaty 4 territory, and I want to acknowledge the territory that I'm in, Treaty 6 territory, home to the Cree peoples and homeland of the Métis Nation. I also want to acknowledge my ancestors who are clearly here with me.
That's tough, wow. She's getting really emotional about her Native American ancestry. Not Chief Running Bear. She's Morningstar. Morningstar Bear. It's not funny. I mean, that's her ancestral name. Who am I to make fun of? Not make fun of it. But now let's get an update on this story. This is from the New York Post. It says a Canadian medical researcher who rose to become the nation's top voice on Indigenous healthcare has been ousted from her government job and her university professorship after suspicious colleagues investigated her increasingly fanciful claims of Native American heritage and learned she was a fraud. So it turns out they looked into this and they did a lot of research about it. And it turns out that she's not a Native American. So she pulled an Elizabeth Warren. But unlike Elizabeth Warren got the exception, and she got the get out of jail free card. She got the get out of jail free card for her appropriation, and there's only one of them, and she got it. So Carrie Barossa, Morningstar Bear, is not going to get it. It turns out they traced her family tree. I don't know how exactly they did this. I don't know if they obtained a DNA sample against her will or something. They took from a drinking glass that she was drinking and took the DNA sample. I don't know what they did, but they traced her family heritage, and they discovered that she is really descended from immigrant farmers from Russia and Poland and Czechoslovakia. Well, we are doing Christmas at our house this year, which is how I like it. We don't have to travel and everything, but when you have guests over for the holiday season, you always want to make sure you're impressing them with all of your fancy belongings. And this is how I'll be impressing my Christmas guests. This is the Kamikoto knives that I've just received. And, we actually just needed, hold on, can I pull one of these out? The other thing about these knives is they're very, very sharp. So I probably shouldn't be doing this at all. Kamikoto makes great Japanese steel kitchen knives using traditional techniques from Japan. Kamikoto taps into more than 800 years of traditional techniques from Honshu, Japan. Kamikoto also only uses steel sourced from mills in Japan, and each blade is crafted using techniques that have been honed and perfected by generations of knife smiths. And again, they're very, very sharp, so you don't want to be doing exactly what I'm doing right here. Knives are not toys. I tell my kids all the time, unless I'm playing with them. Each knife comes in a beautiful, heavy-duty ash wood box. It makes sure that the knife is stored safely. It also makes Kamikoto a great gift. Each Kamikoto knife goes through a rigorous 19-step process that takes several years from start to finish to complete, and you can tell just when you hold them in your hand how well made these knives are. Our expert bladesmiths forge and shape raw steel into hardy blades, polishing and sharpening them to an excruciatingly fine edge. Each knife is individually inspected. Kamikoto is so confident about their knives that each knife comes with a lifetime guarantee. These things are so fine and sharp that you could cut your finger off and you wouldn't even notice until the finger's laying on the floor. Because of their single bevel edge, Kamikoto knives can achieve an unbelievably sharp edge you just can't get with other knives. They can cut through your ribeye like butter. They can cut through, your body parts, everything. Kamikoto knives are used by several chefs working at Michelin star restaurants. So click the link below or go to kamikoto.com/Matt Walsh and use promo code Matt Walsh to save an extra $50 today. So 2 things about this. One is, again, we have more proof that the mainstream narrative of systemic oppression is false. The version of systemic oppression, the narrative of systemic oppression that we get from the reality curators is completely false. Because if indigenous people were persecuted, if they were oppressed, then, and you were not in the oppressed group, you in fact were in the dominant group, allegedly, you would not pretend to be in the oppressed group because it would not benefit you. These people do this because they know it will benefit them, and it does, until the ruse is discovered. But also, you would think if you're trying to score points off of the suffering of your ancestors, which you shouldn't be able to do, okay, in a normal and a sane society, you wouldn't be able to do that. The fact that your ancestors suffered shouldn't do anything for you because it's not your suffering. But if that's what this was about, then you would think that your ancestors being Polish farmers, why not just go with that? Why not go with the truth? Polish farmers, these were probably people who lived pretty difficult lives. I don't know about you. I wouldn't want to trade places with a Polish farmer from the 19th century. But they don't count. That's why, because their suffering doesn't count because they were basically white, and so that's why that doesn't count. And then, but the second thing we can take from this, or the question we can ask, I guess, is really more of a rhetorical question because I know the answer. But of course, why can't she identify as a Native American? Why is this not a valid thing? She feels connected with Native American culture. She identifies with it. This is her truth. She has transitioned. Okay, she's living that truth. Doesn't harm anybody else. This is what we're always told about trans people, right? This is what we're always told. Well, if somebody wants to live that way, it doesn't harm you. What difference does it make? If this is what they want to identify, what does it matter? Same thing should apply here. Only, as I always say, even more so. The person claiming to be transracial or trans-ethnic, their claim is more credible, is more defensible. It's still not credible and not defensible, but it's more credible and more defensible than the transgender claim. Because we know that races and ethnicities are, in fact, fluid. Okay, they combine. Culture is also very fluid. It changes over time. It has different influences and so on. You can actually be a mix of different races and different ethnicities. Almost everybody is. Whereas with sex, that's not the case. You're either male or female. So you would think that this would be a perfectly valid thing that a person could do, but they can't because it doesn't fit with the narrative. And I know that another thing you hear from the right a lot is that this is part of the slippery slope. And so right now we've got the transgender thing, and eventually we'll be in a spot where we're expected to accept transracial also. But no, because this is not a slippery slope situation. On the slippery slope, the idea is that the next thing is always more outrageous and more absurd and more grotesque, right? But transracial is actually farther up on the slope because it's more defensible and more credible. We have leapfrogged over transracial. We're not doing that. The only problem with the slippery slope idea is that it doesn't always follow a logical progression. Because it's not like we're sliding down this slope by happenstance. We are being steered down it by cultural forces. And so there are certain things that you would think would be part of the logical progression that they kind of steer around because they don't want to do that one. The transracial thing, we're not doing that. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.